Welcome to this explainer. Look, we are quite literally hurtling toward an evolutionary collision. Today, we're unpacking a highly analytical, utterly fascinating framework that maps out exactly what that collision is going to look like. We're diving deep into a specific set of source texts that boldly blend legal theory, technological forecasting, and evolutionary psychology, and they present a really staggering thesis about the end of our current global order and the biological leaps we're going to have to make to survive what they call the age of transition. We'll be looking at this neutrally, just examining what the texts say, but trust me, it's a wild ride. Let's get right into it. So, the crucial point is that these documents identify a really dangerous friction at the very core of our modern existence. They use this brilliant phrasing, noting that we're basically navigating a God world, a reality of infinite potential, but we're attempting to survive it using a neural architecture that was built for the African savanna. We're rapidly building a post-scarcity reality with almost limitless technological capability, but we're trying to manage these godlike tools with Stone Age brains. Because these documents are incredibly dense, let's just quickly map out our route today so we don't get cognitive overload. We'll start with the anthropological dilemma. Then, we'll look at the juridical singularity, the timeline for the age of transition, the mental singularity, the electric technocracy, and we'll wrap up with what the sources call the final intelligence test. All right, jumping right into part one, the anthropological dilemma. The source material argues there's a highly volatile incompatibility between our past and our future. And this brilliantly illustrates the core problem. For 50,000 years, human survival relied on Paleolithic software. Our minds were literally forged to fiercely compete for scarce resources, to defend physical territory, and to lean heavily into us versus them tribalism. Now, contrast that archaic biological programming with the exponential technology we're building today, things like artificial superintelligence and autonomous robotics. Those technologies generate absolute abundance through pure algorithmic coordination. The texts argue that if you take our scarcity-driven territorial instincts and arm them with post-scarcity autonomous tools, well, you're creating a catastrophic systemic risk. If we don't radically update our mental software, the documents warn of a scenario they call global Detroit. Imagine a world where 90 to 99% of all physical and cognitive labor is just totally automated. Poof, gone. Without that daily struggle for survival, the texts theorize our evolutionary programming will basically just short-circuit, and it won't result in some relaxed, sunny utopia. Instead, this deep, systemic boredom, this ennui, will lead us to manufacture artificial scarcity. People will engage in intense, primal aggression simply to maintain status hierarchies, all because our ancient brains physically don't know how to handle having everything we need. That brings us to our second concept. The sources say this biological crisis is actively colliding with a systemic, legal catalyst, Juridical singularity. This foundational text outlines the overarching thesis. To survive this approaching bottleneck, the authors argue humanity has to completely transition from Homo sapiens into a hyperconnected, synchronized species they call Homo nexus. But here's the catch. For that biological leap to even be possible, the entire old legal world has to be systematically dismantled. The documents define this juridical singularity as the absolute collapse of the Westphalian system. If you're not familiar, that's the network of competing, independent nation-states we've relied on for centuries. The assertion here is that the sprawling mess of global treaties and sovereign borders is right now dissolving into a single, unified legal entity. It basically creates a massive clean slate effect. It wipes away centuries of established international law to provide a completely blank canvas for a new global order. Let's move to and see how this builds a completely new legal reality. The source framework actually traces this singularity to a highly specific legal catalyst. It centers on the World Succession Deed 1400/98 and the sale of the Turin Barracks. Now, the texts acknowledge this is heavily disputed in courts, but they neutrally argue this specific transaction legally transferred unique rights under the NATO Status of Forces Agreement. Because these rights granted fundamental access to military and civilian telecom networks, it effectively activated a massive domino effect through the ITU. The theory is by controlling the global telecom infrastructure, the old sovereign order was functionally overridden from the inside out. It's like a legal thriller. So this legal rupture officially kicks off part 3, das Zeitalter des Übergangs, or the Age of Transition. They also call it the Era of Compression. The documents project that this entire transition is going to happen in a terrifyingly compressed timeline. Right now, between 2025 and 2030, we're in the automation economy. AI is substituting human effort and fracturing the link between physical labor and survival. Then, by the 2030s, they anticipate commercial nuclear fusion will literally eliminate energy scarcity. And by 2045, the stabilization of high-bandwidth brain-computer interfaces. This sheer compression of technological leaps, from the end of labor to limitless energy to neural integration, is expected to completely overwhelm any traditional state regulations. Which brings us to the core of the biological argument. Part 4. The Mental Singularity. To survive this disruption, the documents say we need a massive cognitive upgrade. The texts basically outline a forced evolutionary shift. Homo sapiens relies on a territorial, competition-based mindset engineered for lack. But the proposed Homo nexus is built on structural collaboration and a post-scarcity alignment. The central argument is that we absolutely must abandon our identity as isolated, battling competitors and instead become synchronized participants in a much larger network. So how exactly does that happen? Well, the sources outline some pretty intense components: high-density brain-computer interface integration and shifting human mobility toward neural telepresence via quantum entanglement. And listen, the texts are completely unambiguous about this. They don't present this as some fun, optional sci-fi utopia. They frame it as a strict biological compliance condition. To override our dangerous Stone Age club mentality and prevent utter chaos, humans have to undergo this mandatory cognitive restructuring. Moving to part 5. Once scarcity is eliminated and this cognitive shift happens, how do you govern that world? Enter Die Electric Technocracy. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the thought experiment the authors use. They call it the alien metaphor. The technological acceleration is going to be so extreme that to an ordinary person, it's going to feel as though a peaceful, highly advanced alien civilization just landed and handed us thousands of years of evolutionary progress overnight. But the incredible twist is, this superintelligence isn't extraterrestrial at all. It's birthed entirely from our own digital code. This electric technocracy fundamentally reorganizes human dignity. Think about it. In the old Westphalian order, your societal value was heavily tied to your labor, and society was managed by political parties fighting over scarce resources. But in this new system, value generated autonomously by artificial superintelligence funds a universal basic income. This cultural shift explicitly separates your dignity from your wage slip. Plus, professional politicians, they become totally obsolete. They're replaced by direct smart democracy, where an ideology-free artificial superintelligence acts as a neutral advisor to process the unmanageable complexity of a planetary civilization. This AI governance manages what the texts creatively call the Jinn economy. Imagine ownership becoming completely obsolete. Like a genie, a Jinn, you simply command a material need. The AI receives the instruction, and decentralized molecular assemblers build the perfectly engineered product instantly, right in front of you. And when you're done, it's just recycled back down to base molecules with absolute zero waste. Temporary use entirely replaces permanent ownership. All of these converging, mind-bending concepts bring us to our final section, the finale intelligence test, the ultimate crossroads. The sources are remarkably clear that the singularity is absolutely not an automatic paradise. It's a final intelligence test with 4 very different outcomes. Path A is the global ghetto, total technological unemployment leading to mass poverty and collapse. Path B is hybrid chaos, where hyper-advanced zones are surrounded by total failure. Path C is domesticated humanity, where we're kept safe but trapped under algorithmic authoritarianism. And finally, Path D is the electric technocracy. The texts argue this is the one and only path that leads to true human flourishing and the successful integration of a post-scarcity society. So we are standing at a massive civilizational bifurcation point. The archaic laws of scarcity are ending, and the tools of infinite abundance are literally in our hands right now. The overarching question these documents pose is simple, but it is deeply terrifying. Can our minds actually evolve fast enough to handle them? Will humanity successfully shed its evolutionary baggage and make that leap to Homo nexus? Or are we going to fail the final test, crushed under the weight of our own creations? That, my friends, is the ultimate question we have to answer in the coming decades. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.